Peter Schiff Show.
Joining our program now is Doug Casey, and if you don't know Doug, he is a libertarian economist. He's a best-selling financial author, an international investor, entrepreneur, and founder of chairman of Casey Research. They publish a monthly newsletter, The International Speculator, and most recently, Doug has produced a 30-minute documentary called Meltdown, which I watched just yesterday on the internet, and it's free. I would encourage everybody to watch it. It's a very entertaining half hour. Doug, welcome to the Peter Schiff Show.
Thanks, Peter. It's my pleasure.
Hey, so in particular about your movie, which I thought was well done, the story that was most compelling to me, I thought, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit, was the interview with the gentleman from Zimbabwe. Who had lived there most of his life, was prosperous, had a business, and then had the foresight to read the writing on the wall, leave everything behind, flee to Australia, warn his friends who made fun of him, and then ended up, succumbing to having their property seized. And I should have listened to you.
Yes, it's an absolutely true story, of course. I've spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe and before that in Rhodesia over the years. I think the first time I went there personally was in about 1976. And his story is quite accurate about what happened to him in Zim. But it's happened a number of places in the world, and it's going to happen in other places in the future, because most people don't realize that as big as their investment risks are today, with markets, many markets being overinflated and so forth, their biggest risks are actually political risks. The biggest danger to you is your own government. In his case, it was the Zimbabwe government, but I guess most of the people listening now are Americans, and actually the U.S. government is like a predator stalking us on the African plains.
But what really is compelling about the story, and what people should really take to heart, is the attitude that pervades is that, well, it's not going to happen here, it can't happen here. People don't want to think about that worst case scenario. They want to assume that things are going to be okay. And if somebody is warning about this potential doomsday, that is the person who they ridicule, who they say, "Oh, you're crazy. That's never going to happen." And it happens in places like Zimbabwe, but expand it because it's happening in America.
Well, look, I hate to sound like a Cassandra, a gloomy Gus. I hate to say the sky is falling, and I know you do too. But you've got to be realistic. And what's happening now to the U.S., and I don't call it America anymore, I call it the U.S., because although America is a fantastic idea, a wonderful idea, America has, as a concept, is rapidly disappearing from the land area called the United States. So, I hate to sound gloomy, because there's lots of reasons for optimism that we can recount. I mean, the main ones I can recount for being optimistic are that the average guy tries to produce more than he consumes and save the difference. That builds capital, builds prosperity, and we have more scientists and engineers alive today now than we've had in all previous history put together. So that's cause for optimism. But there's a lot of cause for real pessimism, certainly in the short term, the next decade or so in the U.S., and it could get worse from there. So you and I are pretty much on the same page economically, and it makes me a little uncomfortable not being on the same page with you, but having to be gloomy. But I have to assess the facts.
You can't. Yeah, you can't ignore the facts. I mean, you don't like to say that the sky is falling, but then if you see it falling, you don't want to just pretend that you don't see what you see, because that's worse. I mean, it's better to warn about the catastrophes, so maybe your warnings could help put into effect policies that might avert the catastrophe. Or if you can't do that, at least help as many people as possible prepare for it in advance, so that they don't get hit by surprise.
Yes, although I greatly discount the odds of things changing, because policies and governments have a momentum of their own, and in our case, it's like imagine a village at the bottom of a valley, and collectivism and statism started out as a small snowball 100 years ago, and now it's turned into a giant avalanche. Now, once it gets to the giant avalanche stage, you can't stop it. So I'm afraid that the village at the bottom of the valley is going to be smashed. So you've got to run for high ground and hide. I don't think we can stop it at this point. The trend is too entrenched, too far in motion, and the fact that 50% of Americans are reliant upon the government for their income alone is a guarantee of bad things.
Yeah, and I mean, Doug, you have been an observer, a critic of this trend that has been ongoing in America for a long time. I mean, it's not like we suddenly find ourselves on the precipice of disaster. We've been on that precipice for a long time. It's kind of amazing that we haven't fallen over just yet, but it's been a long time building. What do you think now that, I mean, and even my dad, was in this camp, back in the 70s, and, issuing warnings. But what do you see today that might make you think that, this is the end game? I mean, there's not another couple of decades where, you're going to be sounding the alarm that, we don't have that much more time.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Peter. When do we actually reach the actual end game, as opposed to just an accelerating downturn? I would say that what started in 2007, I think that's the end game, because the Federal Reserve has been creating money and debasing the currency since its creation in 1913. And since the Fed was created, the dollar has lost well over 95% of its value. But now, just in the last 5 years, their balance sheet, which is the best indicator of how much actual new money they're creating, has gone from $500 billion to $4.5 trillion, and they're still creating more. So they've shot all their arrows. And when the economy turns down again, and I think it's in process of doing that now, there's nothing they can do. They've already reduced interest rates to near zero. The Chinese and the Japanese aren't buying any more government debt, and the official number is $500 billion a year of deficit now. So the Federal Reserve is going to be printing up money wholesale. This is a very scary thing. So, yeah, I think we actually have reached the actual edge of the precipice. Maybe there's something else that can happen, but I don't
the
see
amazing
it.
thing, too, and you point this out, is, statistically they're telling us we've been in a recovery for 5 years, which means, statistically we're also getting close to the next recession, right? Just by the probability, how long the expansion has been. Yet we've never begun a recession where rates are still at zero. We've never begun a recession while they're still stimulating us from the previous recession. And nobody seems to worry about the outcome of beginning a recession from the position that we're in right now.
No, you're absolutely right. And the numbers that they crank out to make everybody feel good are almost as phony as the numbers that the Argentine government cranks out. I live in Argentina most of the year, actually, and there the Cristina Fernandez government says, well, we only have 10% inflation. but everybody knows that it's 30 to 40%. And here they say we have 1 to 2% inflation. I would say that inflation is realistically in the 8 to 10% range here in the U.S., and it's going much higher.
And that makes a lot more sense to me, given what I'm observing in the actual economy, because, the critics who argue that that's impossible, that the people who think that inflation is more than 2 or 3%, they say they must be wrong, because that would mean that the economy has not experienced any legitimate economic growth. And to that, I would say, absolutely, it hasn't. The growth is all a fantasy. It's all the result of the assumption that there's no inflation when there really is, because what we have is inflation masquerading as economic growth. But the bottom line is the economy is really contracting. That's why the labor force is shrinking. That's why we're using less energy. That's why people's standard of living is going down and real incomes are falling and job opportunities are disappearing. It's because we're in a recession and no one wants to admit it.
You're absolutely right. And from this point, it's going to get much more obvious and get much worse. I just wonder what the social consequences are going to be when the economy goes into a free fall again. Maybe by the end of this year. I think certainly next year. I mean, it's an open question whether people will riot.
Yeah, and you can already see the frustration that's being expressed. I often joke, if this is the Obama recovery, imagine how bad the recession is going to be. And, we're running these deficits. The president is bragging now that the deficit is finally below $1 trillion, that it might be 600 or 700 billion. But that's the deficit in the recovery. If we slip into a legitimate or acknowledged recession, where are the deficits going to go? $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion? And how could we possibly finance that when the world is already saturated with the debt that we've issued to stimulate us out of prior recessions? But we'll talk about that. We got a commercial. Also, I got to get to gold and silver, something that I know you've been advocating for a while. I want to talk about your outlook there for precious metals and other investments that people can make to try to protect themselves from the coming inflation and collapse of the dollar, which I think we both agree at this point is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, only a matter of when and how soon. So we got a break, and we will be right back. We are speaking with Doug Casey, the founder of Casey Research. They also publish a monthly metals and mining-focused investment letter, The International Speculator. And, Doug, when it comes to gold and silver, I've never seen an environment where you have so many central banks embracing inflation as a goal, that they think they want more inflation, and they somehow think that it's going to help the economy. And at the same time, you have complete complacency on the part of investors to any of the risks associated with inflation that all these central bankers are promising to create.
You're absolutely right. And as you're well aware, Peter, it was Lenin that said the best way to destroy a country is to debauch its currency. And it's perverse and idiotic what all the central banks around the world are doing at this point, but some are worse than others. And the Europeans are out of control, the Japanese are out of control, the Chinese central bank, and, of course, the Fed here in the U.S. So that's one reason why I continue accumulating gold very regularly, all the time. It's the only financial asset that's not simultaneously somebody else's liability. And I'm not interested in holding paper in an over-financialized world that we're in today.
Yeah, and, you've been a buyer, for a long time, a regular buyer and holder of metals. What do you think it's going to take, though, to convince the skeptics who are so in love with paper and who make fun of, the gold bugs for their irrational obsession with this obscure, obsolete yellow metal? What do you think it's going to take for the mainstream to start buying into gold and silver and, of course, the mining stocks?
I think it's going to take a financial and economic collapse. And I hate to say it, but I think we're on the edge of something that's much worse than what we had in 2008 and 2009. And as I look around the world at places where you can put your capital, real estate is overpriced. The stock market is greatly overpriced. The bond market is in a historic bubble. That's about the best short sale I can think of in the world. So what are you left with? Gold is not a giveaway the way it was in 2001 at $250, $260 an ounce, but it's reasonably priced. So I'm continuing to buy it. I think there's going to be a panic into gold, quite frankly.
You know, Doug, I don't know. I think it could be just as big a giveaway now, because if you look at the cost of production of gold today versus what it was 12 years ago, it costs a lot more to produce gold. And if you look at the amount of money that the central banks have created over the last 12 years and the amount of money that they are threatening to create in the next, I mean, I think you can make a case that gold is cheaper now at $1,200 than it was at $300.
Well, when you look at the cost of mining new gold, there are about 80 million ounces produced every year, and there are perhaps 6 billion in total existence. Most of the mining companies in the world, the big ones like Barrick and Newmont, it's not profitable for them to produce gold, even at $1,300 an ounce, when you consider all the costs of mining. So, yes, I wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah, and, you know, I think a lot of people are still looking at the 2008 experience where gold stocks and gold went down, and they'll say, well, you see, gold doesn't work in a crisis, but they ignore the fact that gold and gold stocks went up so dramatically in the years preceding the crisis because people were, in a way, preparing for it. They saw a lot of money printing, and they were, in fact, buying gold and silver. They're not prepared for it now. Whoever was buying, or most of the people that were buying in 2007, they've already sold their gold. The investors that were participating, because they're so confident that gold's going down. In fact, you talk about a bubble in assets like stocks and real estate. The irony of it is the professional investors who are happily paying ridiculous valuations for stocks, the only bubble that they can identify is the one that doesn't exist, except in their mind, and that is the bubble that they see in gold.
Yes, that's right. The real bubble is in the bond market, and the bond market is much bigger than the stock market. So when the bubble in bonds bursts, it's going to be very, very ugly. I've got to make a distinction. I think you'll agree with this. I've bought gold my whole life. I've never sold 1 ounce, because I buy it for safety, for savings, prudence, insurance. But I've been very involved in the gold stock market for many years, and gold stocks are a different animal than gold itself. And I treat them as a speculative vehicle because gold stocks are perhaps the most volatile class of securities in the world. I mean, the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which trades about 1,500 supposed gold companies, regularly goes up 10 for 1 and then collapses 95%. And as we speak at this time, it's at a cyclical bottom. So I think it's an extremely high potential speculation to get into gold stocks at this time.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. What about also nations? Quickly, I mean, of the nations that you travel to, which would you consider to be the most stable, maybe the ones that offer the best, not only investment opportunity, but opportunity to live if you want to leave the United States?
Well, the fact of the matter is that all over the world, these governments collude with each other, and these clubs they belong to, like the United Nations and the IMF and the OECD, and they're all going in the wrong direction, which is to say more state power, more taxes.
But we don't have a lot of time, Doug. Quickly, any 1 or 2 countries that are your favorites?
Well, look, where I am most of the time, and I've been to most of the countries in the world, is Argentina, and people think that's a crazy-sounding choice, but it's the eighth largest country in the world. Only 40 million people. They're used to stupidity from their government. They despise their government.
Well, that's for sure, Doug. They're prepared for stupidity, unlike Americans who are going to be surprised by it.